This is part one of a two-part series on how to get out hiking safely. In order to save you time, I am going to put all of the notes below on the key areas. If you want more detail on the theory and the thought behind these items for prep, then you can go ahead and watch the video for more info. We will be doing a part two where we go into gear. Part one, all we're doing is talking about what we do to prep to make sure we can safely get up there and get back from going out on a hike or going out into the field. So I wanted to do something about safety and prepping to get out in the outdoors and go on a hike. And what we're going to do, we're going to enjoy a hike. I'm going to show some scenery and I'm going to cover some items. In this first part, we're going to talk about just the planning, preparation before you've even left the house or headed to the trailhead. And then in the second part, we're going to talk about preparing for and making sure you have the minimum gear you need out on the trail, or at least how you can assess the risk and make a decision for yourself on the gear that you want to take with you. If you're someone that goes hiking on a regular basis, some of these things may seem basic to you. I'd ask, watch, let me know if there's a basic that I missed. The other thing I would say is, sometimes we forget about the basics. This could be a good refresher. I even have one item that I was neglecting that I checked recently that I'm glad I didn't find out about the hard way. And I'll share that in a moment. So the first thing we have is being honest about your skill level, and then finding a hike that's gonna meet or challenge your skill level. Because let's face it, if we go out there to do a hike, get into the outdoors, and it's too hard and totally miserable, you're not gonna want to go back. So once you've kind of thought about what seems like a reasonable distance for you, the next thing is to find a hike. There's lots of sources out there. All Trails comes to mind. Washington State has the Washington Trails Association. And there's probably some others. Anybody watching, if you know of others, go ahead and provide a comment below. The other thing I'd say is these don't have to happen in any particular order, but you're going to want to prioritize based on funding and resources you have, what you got time for, and what you feel is most important. So the next thing you want to look at, you've picked the location out, is how are you going to get there? So a lot of times we're just going to drive. Maybe we'll ride a bike. But you want to make sure that what you are driving or riding has a clean bill of health. So I'll go ahead and share a big mistake I made, and I still caught it before it cost me, is my vehicle spare tire. So I got a spare on my truck. Hadn't checked it in years. Decided it's probably a good idea to make sure it was all in operating order, that I had all my spare tire gear. And when I went into my gear, I found out that the tire was almost completely out of air. Spare kit, everything worked, but had I needed it, I'd have been stranded just as bad as if I lost, one of the other tires. Wouldn't have done me any good. So there's lots of YouTube videos on it. Make sure you check all your fluids and that your vehicle doesn't have a check engine light or anything crazy going on. Make sure you have a spare tire kit. Pull it out, learn how to use it before you have to use it, because you don't want to be stuck in a situation having to figure it out when the sun's going down, when it's getting colder, when it's starting to rain. You don't want things to turn into an emergency on you. The other thing I would say is you really want to look into whether your car has a spare tire or not. There's a lot of new cars that don't even have them and expect roadside assistance. And if you don't have communication equipment or anything that can reach that far, you're going to be in trouble, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. One of the other things we want to talk about is making sure you have a good map. And one of the problems we can run into is we rely on a digital map, like from our phone or from a Google Maps or from a trail app. If you run out of battery or if you lose cell signal, then that's not going to cut it. So one of the things I encourage people to do is to have some kind of backup map that's a topographical map that shows the trails. I'll throw some links below for those. The other thing to think about with cell signal is the communication plan, and I'll talk about that more here in a second. Pretty windy. I'm hoping that the mic I'm using will work, but once you push up to the top of a ridge or a mountain, you pretty much put yourself where all the elements are going to be hitting you. So the final item we're going to cover here, just for the basic safety tips to get you out to a trail in this first part. Second part, I'm going to talk about gear a little bit, but for this first part, the last thing we're going to cover is your communication plan. So a lot of areas are going to tell you they don't have cell service when you go into them. So if you're heading into an area that doesn't have cell service, you have to have some other kind of communication plan. And one is, if you can, traveling with a buddy is always going to help more. The second thing to consider is making sure you tell multiple people where you're going. Because if you take the time to tell people where you're headed and when you should be back, they can at least be keeping an eye out for you if something comes up. The other thing is really telling somebody your timeline, so that if for some reason a certain time hits and they haven't heard back from you, they know it's time to go looking for you. The next thing that's part of that communication plan is they need to know where they're going to look for you. So what I like to do is I usually show my wife where I'm going to be headed for the day and give her what the plan is. Once she knows my plan, the other thing is not to deviate from it. See a different trail and decide I want to go a different way, because then people aren't going to know where I'm at and something could happen. So it's starting to get a little crowded up there. But the other thing I wanted to say with your communication plan is throw in an email to that person telling them where you're going. And also, in that same message, let them know what gear you have, so that from a safety standpoint, if you do go missing, they know what you got with you. And they could actually report that if you end up missing. It's going to do it for some of the basic tips. Again, everyone's different, so there's going to be other things you want to do to make sure you're taken care of. We're going to do a part 2 where we talk a little bit more about gear. Thank you very much for watching. I know you have a lot of choices when it comes to what you do with your time and what you watch. And I know we don't have a lot of freedoms when it comes to certain things in our lives. But right here you have the freedom to choose, and you've chosen to spend that time with me, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for subscribing. I hope the tips in this video helped you. Have a great day. Oh, and remember, get outside. It's good for your inside.